my foundation and my refuge and my deliverer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, our one true God. We have an event that happened lately that could have been put in the kiss of Judas with the Greek Archbishop of America, Elpidophoros, because he did something very blatantly horrible. He was reading a Masonic book by a Masonic author, and he decided to recommend this book to the faithful of the Greek Archdiocese. Now you would say, how is this possible? Masonry, which is a demonic entity, started attacking the Orthodox Church at the turn of the century. Here most of the Orthodox, were freed from the Turkish yoke. We were held in bondage, but we remained always faithful to orthodoxy. And then after 1821, the Greeks received their freedom. So when the Greeks threw off the Turkish yoke in 1821, what is it, just two generations? The turn of the century, we had this Patriarch of Constantinople, Meletius IV. He became a Freemason in the Grand Orient Lodge of Greece in 1910. So he became Patriarch in 1909, and then next year later, voila, he was made a 33-degree Mason in the Grand Orient Lodge of Greece. And when that happened, our Metropolitan Anthony Kopovitsky issued the excommunication of anybody that's in the Russian Church that is a Freemason. In 1932, in August, on the feast of the Dormition, Metropolitan Anthony announced that any Freemason in the Russian Church is excommunicated. They must renounce it. And then look what happened. Greece, not Constantinople. In 1933, the next year, the State Church of Greece condemned Freemasonry as a pagan religion. Freemasonry is a false and anti-Christian system, they said. Very good. Well, what happened in 1935? Meletius dies. Now he's a Mason who became a clergyman, and he ushered in all kinds of modern tendencies. He changed the calendar, did all kinds of malicious things to fight against the church. And when he died, he went out of his mind. Like Silenus, who punished Saint Feronia. After 6 days of grinding his teeth, witnesses. Now this is a Patriarch of Constantinople, but he's a Masonic Patriarch. So in reality, he's not really. Well, he's a Patriarch that has the wrath of God over him. For 6 days, he grinding his teeth and wringing his hands and groaning. And his last words were, "Alas, alas, I have divided the church. I have destroyed orthodoxy." That's Meletius' last words. He's lamenting his life of modernism. So he died in Zurich, Switzerland, and he was buried in Cairo, Egypt. And then, when his body came to Cairo, well, that's where he was patriarch. He was honored, not only as patriarch, but also as a 33-degree Mason by his fellow Masonic, who knows, clergymen. And what did they do? On top of his vestments, they put his Masonic gloves on him. Those are gloves that they're white, and they have the seal of the lodge. That's a compass and a square with a G in the middle. So they put that on his hands, and they gave him an evergreen twig. Who knows what the crazy demonic thing that is? And they put his apron. Oh yes, he had to have his apron. That's a very important part of Masonic ritual. So he was buried like a Mason. Do you think anybody learned a lesson from this in the Greeks? And apparently not. Because in 1948, what happened? This year of the 1900s was horrible for the Greek Church and for Orthodoxy in general, because in 1948, no, it's not that Israel was established as a country. It is that the Archbishop of America, his name was Athenagoras. He was chosen, perhaps because he was a Mason also, to be Patriarch of Constantinople. And as we said, his fellow Masonic President Truman was so happy that one of his brothers in the lodge became Patriarch of Constantinople. He gave him, or flew him all the way to Constantinople on Air Force One. Then we have the picture of Athenagoras kissing Truman, fellow lodge members who kissed each other. So now Athenagoras comes to Constantinople and he starts his mischief. He is possessed by the demon of unlawful love for heresy. How can you love heresy? But this is what he does. And so he has 24 years as Patriarch of Constantinople, 24 years to destroy the church. And so anybody in the Patriarchate who says that Orthodoxy is the one and only church that Christ made for the salvation of the world, which is what Orthodoxy teaches, anybody that says that, Athenagoras is going to say, hey, hit the road, get out of here. So he had 24 years before he dies. He died in 1972. And you would think that he, would somewhat have the same effect on his death as Meletius, who was a mischievous Masonic patriarch. So they saw that they cannot have an open coffin funeral for him. Why? Because he started decomposing immediately, right after his last breath. He is remembered for his lifting of the anathema of 1054 and ushering in the ecumenical movement. Oh, yes. So he had the reputation of ushering in the ecumenical movement. And so, as we saw in the Kiss of Judas a few weeks ago, after 3 years, in Greece they opened the casket and they find that his body has not decomposed as a normal person. It had an evil incorruption. It was bloated and it stank. So they covered over the casket and buried him. So that's what happened. And his successor was Demetrius, a true disciple of Athenagoras. After all, he had 24 years to make sure that all of the bishops that followed him thought the same way, and so Demetrius, same thing, same way. And he promised when he became patriarch, he's going to continue in the ecumenical policies of his predecessor, Athenagoras. 1975, an archbishop, a metropolitan with the same name, Athenagoras, gave a Thyateira Confession. He was a bishop in Britain, and he proclaimed that the episcopacy and priesthood of the Anglicans are true. So all of these bishops who are going in the ecumenical movement, they're following in the footsteps of Athenagoras and Demetrius. And this Athenagoras' confession saying that the mysteries of the Anglicans are true was endorsed by his patriarch Demetrius. And also, they said, the idea that Masonry is a religion is a mistake. They're pushing this ungodliness. An official statement saying the idea that Masonry is a religion is a mistake. Well, now we come to Elpidophoros. Demetrius dies, and the new patriarch is Bartholomew. And his disciple is Elpidophoros, all in the direct line of Athenagoras, who had 24 years to destroy the church, and he did a perfect job. Because Elpidophoros comes to America, and is he a Mason? Well, Athenagoras is a Mason, Demetrius is a Mason, Bartholomew is a Mason. So why would not Elpidophoros, a true disciple of his elders, be also a Mason? What happened lately indicates that yes, he read a book. And the book is written by probably a Greek. His name is Nicholas Laos. And he liked the book. Oh, yes. And he wrote an introduction to the Greek book on what? Noopolitik, or politics of the mind. It was written by this Nicholas Laos, who is a master Mason. I mean, he's in Masonry all the way up to his eyeballs. And you could see his poor eyeballs have been affected. He calls himself a Gnostic Warrior. Oh yeah, he's a Gnostic. And what are the Gnostics? There was an ancient religious movement in the early centuries which existed next to Orthodoxy, fought Christianity. It had Jewish and pagan forms. The basic belief of this Gnosticism is a very complex theology in a Redeemer God, which has special rights if you believe, and secret formulas, sacred, secret formulas that promised salvation to those who would be brainwashed by this stupidity. That's the Gnostics. Well, that's pretty close to Masonry. In fact, it dovetails exactly with Masonry because they have their secret God Redeemer, and they have secret initiations and secret services and secret beliefs, just like Gnosticism. So, this Greek, Nicholas Laos, wrote this book, and he wrote many other books about Masonry. And he's probably a Greek. And so Elpidophoros, instead of reading the church fathers, instead of reading the gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, instead of reading the epistles, he reads this forbidden work of Nicholas Laos about Masonry And theology, what kind of theology can a Mason have? Well, let's put up a picture of this Laos. And there he is with his apron, Masonic apron, his Masonic hat, his Masonic gloves, his white gloves that are stamped with the Masonic seal. He's Dr. Nicholas Laos. And Elpidophoros looks at him and says, and reads his book, and he says, with great joy and deep satisfaction, I read the work of the exceptionally intelligent Nicholas Laos in this area of philosophy, theology, and politics. And it is a bright work. It's a bright work which filled with academic strictness and also great boldness. And how do you make sense out of these things? And then he says, with all my soul, I congratulate Nicholas Laos, the Mason. Now, he doesn't say the Mason, but I wonder why he doesn't say the great Mason of our time. I congratulate Nicholas Laos for his sharpness during the writing of this work, which fills a great absence in this area of philosophy, theology, and political science. There's your Archbishop of the Greek Archdiocese. He is endorsing the writings of the biggest, probably the biggest Mason of our time, a Greek. Why? Why on earth would he do such a thing? Because he's not a bishop. He's not Orthodox. And he is a lost soul. What can you say? So that should have been, that could be an entry if the Kiss of Judas was in print. Okay, thank you all for listening. God bless you all.